hi to us as we are now driving to see the grandparents for a belated Christmas dinner, and that's from Sophie, Alistair, Max and Seb. And we are on our way later to spend the rest of Boxing Day with our auntie and uncle in Ludlow in the hot tub.
Right, Gearbox. So again, came with the car, don't know anything about it. So going to do a little bit of investigation. I have so far just removed this top cover, which obviously slots back in like that. Obviously your gear stick then goes in there. You've then got the control rods that go through to operate the different synchros. You've got the various cut-off switches here, which are to prevent the that one's had it, to prevent the overdrive kicking in when it shouldn't, and also your reversing light as well. So there's two switches there, which I'm not quite sure which way around everything goes yet. But so it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bolts to remove this cover. And I'm going to have to, this cover's obviously been lying around a long time, or this gearbox has, and I've just dropped a bolt in there, but that's not really, the whole thing's going to have to come apart anyway. All these rods are very dirty, and I imagine the O-rings in here, the seals, will probably need replacing anyway, so I want to, that's one part that needs to be done. So the next thing is that I took a look at was the, I'm going to move you here, sorry about the noise, clank clank. Yeah, so the clutch mechanism, and anyone that's done one of these may well recognise this, and will also recognise it's not all there. So unfortunately the rest of it's still stuck in the shaft. This is the pin that holds the clutch fork onto the shaft. Let me get some light from there. So the clutch fork is located on this shaft. As you can see, I removed the bolt, but it's still trapped, and that's because part of that bolt, or the end of the tapered end of that, is stuck inside, has gone through, goes through the shaft and is stuck in there, and into the fork on the other side. So I'm looking at options for that, but I suspect I may end up having to cut the shaft and get a new shaft from Rimmers or wherever. They're not massively expensive, and looking at the shaft and the amount of play in these bushes either side, I'm going to be changing the bushes and I'm going to be changing the shaft anyway, so I suspect that's probably what I'm going to need to do. The two pins that locate into the clutch, into the sleeve with the bearing on the end, that goes in there, normally just like that. They've both got flats worn on them, so again you can change just the pins, they're only a couple of quid, so obviously no point in skimping on those, and but in the meantime I've got to decide whether I want to save the shaft or not, and I'll probably end up having to cut that out, I think. Got a bit of play in the end here, but that's I think acceptable. Got to remember that this end of the main input shaft for the gearbox goes into a bushing in the flywheel, and that's what's actually going to support that, so it locks it there. At the moment it's just literally going through one bearing, and then you have it here where it joins the main shaft, and they just push together, but there's very little support for that until it's actually fitted up to the car. So that's the second thing. So we've got so far solenoid, bushes, shaft, bearings, and synchro mesh. I'll bring you around here so you can see a bit more closely. I've had a look. I don't think it's too bad. Just check you're pointing at the gearbox. So what I'm looking at here is you've got your first, second synchro there. So to engage first, you would go, I think it's back. Like that. Oh, I need both hands for this one. Oh. Yeah, so that should be first gear. Then you take it forwards. That's going to be second gear. That's back into neutral again. Then you've got your third and fourth here, and I think it's back for third, like so. That's your third gear, and then forwards for fourth. Oh. And then that's now directly driven, so that the input shaft and the output shaft from the overdrive at the back here, without the overdrive engaged, are effectively going at the same speed. So whatever RPM you're doing on with your engine is the RPM that's going to be coming out the back of the gearbox. Then you've got the overdrive unit. Don't know what's going on with that yet. I know that the solenoid doesn't work, but that's just, it could be other things as well. Obviously I never saw the gearbox in operation before I bought the car, so it's just a case of having to go through everything really. As regards to synchro rings, what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at the definition and the profile on the teeth on the synchro rings. You're looking for a sort of coffin shape with a point at the end, and over time with grinding of gears, that's the bit that makes the grinding noise. So it's never the actual cogs, and I watched a video on this. It's just the synchros. So what you're looking for really with the synchros is to make sure that the teeth on the synchro rings, on the bulk rings and on the gear side are nice and clean, and that there's no damage to them, because if they're worn, then that's where you're going to get problems with grinding of gears and a noisy gear train. So these actually look okay to me, but we'll have to just maybe look a bit closer. So I think I'm going to take the gearbox apart and I'm going to investigate and get some advice, but this is just the first bit. Obviously I'm going to have to get some parts, and I'm going to have to look at stripping this off, checking the overdrive, checking the gearbox, making sure everything's really clean, put it all back together, make sure everything's got the right end float and shimmed up correctly, and then I have a electric motor that I'm going to set up a test stand, and then I'm going to spin up the gearbox. I've got a pressure gauge coming, which is designed to plug into a port underneath here to check the oil pressure, which is what what engages the overdrive, the pressure of the oil. It's got its own oil pump built into it. So yeah, so that's where we're at. Right. Okay. So guess what? I got the shaft out. I should have been recording. I wasn't, so I'm sorry, but it came out using a bit of brute force. So basically, what I did was I located the fork up against, so that I twisted this so the fork was pushed against the inside of the mount, the gearbox housing, and then I just took so it was locked in about that position. It wouldn't go any further. So I then took a lump hammer, gave this a good few smacks, and what that did was shear off the nose of the bolt in the shaft and allow the shaft to spin freely within the fork. No forks were damaged in this process, so I've got a good fork. The shaft actually isn't really worn, so I might try and get this piece of here. This is the remaining bit. I think I can tap it through from the other side. In fact, it even feels a bit loose. So might have a quick go at that while you're there. So let me just grab a drift. Turn you around. So I'm literally just going to try and, there you go. That's the offending item. So that's the one that sheared off, and as you can see, what I did was effectively round it off in the end. So I've now got a clear hole through the shaft, no real damage there, and I have the fork, and it doesn't look like I've had any damage done in there, so I'm just going to give that a clean up, but yeah, it should be fine. I need to replace both the pins. They've both got flat spots on there, so that's easily done. In fact, you can buy hardened ones as well now. So that's it. So got that bit off. Okay, so got the clutch parts all out, know what we need from there. Taken off the front housing that covers the bearing, and I'm just going to remove the overdrive section of the gearbox, which is held on by a series of 1/2 inch or 5/16 I think bolts, nuts, screws. Got to use the right lingo. I suspect some of these may or should be put back with copper washers to prevent oil leaking out. So I'm just going to pay attention to the washers as they come off, and not necessarily trust the fact that they're right, but just see. At the moment they're all spring washers, so I need to double check and see if try it all this stage again. Okay, maybe we need something a little bit more lumpy. The old copper mallet. There you go. Never fails. Okay. That's the cam that operates the oil pump inside the overdrive. So, having read up on this and also watched some very useful YouTube videos, Elin Yakov's Rusty Beauties, although it's primarily GT6's, very similar gearbox, a lot of the same stuff applies. So what we've effectively got to do in order to take out the input shaft, check the bearings and everything else, we have to remove the lay shaft, which I think is this one here. This one here is the lay shaft. There's a crosshead screw with a plate that holds both the lay shaft and the reverse shaft in place. So it's just one screw and a flat plate. So crosshead screw. Ah, perfect. Very chunky monkey cross point. Right. So this will probably be the perfect tool for the job. There you go. Okay, so with that off, then this will allow both the shafts to come out. I think this shaft out to remove it. No, there you go. You can just flip the plate out. It starts bringing out one of the shafts with it. Okay, so that's the plate that then holds both the reverse and lay shaft in place. So I think what we'll do is start with the lay shaft. This will then drop once I remove this from the gearbox, and then we can take the cover off at the other end to help push it through. That will allow me to push the shaft through. Copper washers on these two. These are this is the cover plate that put all that over here. There you go. It's left behind the gasket. This makes the gasket. So that cover plate covers over from this end the shaft that runs down through the lay shaft, and I can then just push with my thumb here, and you can actually see it coming out. The fun bit will be getting this back in, because you have to run that shaft. In order to get this back in, you can't have that installed. So you can't have the lay shaft installed. You need that set of gears down in the bottom of the gearbox whilst you feed this back in, because it comes in from that angle through here. And yeah, once you've removed this shaft, you are very much committed. There you go. So that there is the lay shaft. It's in pretty good order, no scoring, no wear. So obviously that slot is what then locates on the bracket, on the plate that holds it in place. So it's easy to tell which way round it goes. So we'll just put that over here. So now what's happened is that gear set has completely dropped into the bottom of the gearbox. So that will allow, yeah, it's all disconnected. I can now drift out the front input shaft, which effectively just pushes into a bearing on the main shaft as it runs through here. So this section with this wheel, with this gear and synchro mesh bit there will come through the front of the gearbox, and you actually have to just drift it out gently. Unfortunately I haven't got a copper bar, but I think the bearing's going to be hard as steel, so I don't think that's too much of a problem. So you just have a tiny little drift here onto the outer, that's the outer surface of the bearing race. It's gradually easing out. Okay, that gently eased out the front of the gearbox. Just fell down into the bottom there, the belt housing, but no damage done. So I'm going to put that to one side. Just want to check all of this, obviously, as I go through. The bearing that's left behind is actually on the shaft here. So put that to one side there and show you a bit closer up. So you can see there the roller bearing that's remaining on the shaft, this one here, which you also need to be, if you're at this stage, to not change it would be a bit daft really, as I go through the rest of the gearbox. Sorry about the clunking noises from the camera stand. Right, so I'm going to pull that out. That can actually go into, plop that into the end of that. That's where it would sit there. Right, so where are we? So in order to get the this section out of the gearbox, the main shaft with all of the associated gears, the bearing has to be sent out in that direction and removed from the shaft, so we have to take this off as well. Once you've done that, you've then obviously got all the clearance there of the hole where the bearing is currently sat, to then tilt the shaft up and pull it out in that direction. But in order to do this, the first thing we have to do is remove this cam, which is for the drive on the oil pump for the overdrive. So what I'm going to do next is that. So we've got a, oh no, I hate those, little ring to remove, a split ring there, which are always the worst things to get off. Right, so first try will be with a pair of circlip pliers. However, there aren't any holes here. You're literally going into the groove and trying to open it out enough to split it out. Which seems to be working. I can just get a screwdriver underneath it, I can then ease it out. Okay, so I've got that partially out there. And what I can do is I can use the screwdriver to gently work it out all the way around. There you go. So just gradually remove that. Shoulder there for it to get over into the shaft. There you go. So that piece is out. Should be able to withdraw the cam. So this is directional. Don't think it matters which way around it goes. But what I might do, simply that the cleaner face was facing forwards, although I'm going to clean all of this. So, yeah. And then there is a locating key there as well, which I don't think we're going to have to remove. Just going to put that there with its pin, with its split pin. I'm going to leave that in place, I don't leave that there. Turn off the heating, it's actually very hot. What we then need to do is remove this split ring here, which should be a lot easier because it's got holes. There you go. Just check how that's fixed. So has it got any kind of angled groove. No, it doesn't look like it has. So that's basically the order of things. A bit more shock would probably work. Okay, that's fine. Copper mallet wouldn't damage the hardened shaft, which is why I'm using it. I'm just checking there that I'm not doing any damage. Right, so I've now knocked this shaft through a bit more. Probably going to tap it in a little bit more. There you go. So my plan is now to actually, almost as I tap this back, I might see that then, I'm hoping, what I see is that that will then push the bearing out as it taps back into place. So I've now got to find something suitable to tap that in place. So I'm going to go with a piece of wood on the end here. See if we can shift that bearing somehow. I think we're starting to see a bit of light there. I think a bit heavier might help. Hasn't popped yet, although I can see some daylight, so maybe I'm just starting to make a difference here. Okay, you probably missed that, but we've now got the bearing coming out proud. So it's about as far as I can tap it in that direction because I'm up against this gear. So I now need to get something underneath to pry it out. Hopefully a couple of pry bars will do that. So just under the edges of the circlip. Oh, come on. Right, now I think the problem I've got now is the shaft is all the way back through into the bearing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this in place there. Give that another tap going forwards. So basically just trying to move the two apart. Okay, so what I now need to do is see if I can pry that bearing out any further, or whether I've got to tap the shaft in further. It's not. Oh, tough one. Okay, I guess it's a case of going back the other way again for a few taps. Yeah. Okay, so the bearing's now clear, but we now need to remove the shaft again, so it's a case of now going the other way. Okay, so the shaft is now free, and I think we can now just flip the bearing out. It's right on the edge. There you go. So we have a couple of spaces here. Around they went. So now that that's free, we can literally lever this through the top of the gearbox. Reverse lever out the way. Okay, there you go. That's that one out. So just put that over there. Take a good look at that. So we've got the reverse gear still in there, so I can just remove the shaft of the reverse gear. That comes out easily like that. So that's your reverse gear. A little bit warm. And then finally we have the lay shaft, which is sat down at the bottom of the gearbox here. It should come out with one piece. There's a couple of thrust washers either end. Okay, I need to get that thrust washer out. Okay, let's get that out, and then I need to just move it back enough to clear the front. So that's the rear thrust washer. The rear. So we'll just put that there. And that should now allow us to move this out. Okay, so we have our needle bearings, roller bearings, whatever you want to call them, in there. And look, we have a bolt that fell out of the top when I was taking the top off earlier. We've also got some ball bearings which would have come out of one of the synchro rings, so I need to get those out. There's 3 in there. I think it's the front synchro ring that got dislodged when we were tapping things around earlier. Right, so I can give this all a good clean out and check the gears out, check the bearings out, decide if I want to buy any new bits.